Right now, we are going to the second part of this beautiful yachi with two keynote lectures. The first one is Yeung. We speak about the applied tapu transcription epitatonism and need to expand our strings to be epitatonically tuned as an alternative tuning system for our instrument. This is the title for her talk. Is about turning in a different look or a different way of looking to Qin and talk about a little bit different systems, different scales that we can explore on Qin. And after her, we will have the special guest, Kang Wang, who will speak about silk strings. I will talk later about this. Right now, Juni, you are ready? Okay.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. And what a great set of different traditional pieces that we have heard earlier hour. So today, I would like to share with you guys something a little different, a look about the future. And that is whenever we play a piece of adapted music, usually pop music, towards on the guqin, we're often confronted with the problem of how do we work those small key changes or those semitone step-ups and so forth. And after having heard so many play and myself very poorly, now I think I'm finally ready to present a draft of possibly some innovations and some change that I can bring about to the community. And the name I'm deciding to call it is, well, for easy access, the 9-stringed qin. So the 9-stringed qin all started with this discussion from Facebook. And a person by the name of Alexander Cortez started talking about how many strings the qin used to have, 5 strings, maybe 1 string, and then expand to 7. And he, right off the bat, gave me the most precise and concise, beautifully worded way of describing why the current system of having 7 strings works. And that's, if you look at the square brackets, those are your set A, or like your 9th way and 7th way harmonic matching pair-ups. You'll notice that they're perfectly parallel, top half and bottom half. And this is only possible when you have this set of pentatonic tones being way so that the gong string is not actually in the middle, but rather shan, or the number 2 in the middle. And somehow that creates the perfect balance of top and bottom on 7 strings. And if you want to know more details, I have a video on my channel about that. But moving onward from that, what happens if we want to play something that is not pentatonic? That's when we have to start rethinking the engineering in this system into what makes this system so perfect. And is it possible to recreate such a perfect setup with new contexts? So for example, when we're talking about the limits of the current 7-string pentatonic tunings, I have O Canada, the national anthem of Canada, adapted to the guqin, the back of my book, Standards of the Guqin. Originally, it is written in a F major, which is standard tuning on our instruments. However, you can't actually play O Canada using standard tuning on the guqin. Otherwise, you would have to use a lot of pressed strings in order to do so, because there's a lot of semitone sharps and little raises here and there. And in the final stanza, everything goes up a semitone as well, which makes it particularly hard. So how are you going to play something like that on a qin where you're not going to retune the strings every time there's a key change? So you're going to have to grok things around and use a non-standard tuning to make sure that you have all the tones for that little piece ready before you even start playing. And that's the hard part of doing 打谱, trying to fit that piece onto a given Qin tuning. And this is particularly hard when you have a piece that goes for several different key changes. So I did some moving around, and I finally found out that Xi Liang tuning, so tighten strings 2 and 5, the tuning that's used to play Hua Xu Yin or even Li Sao, works perfectly to play O Canada. But in order to do so, you need to transpose the piece from F major, that being standard tuning starting on 3rd string on the Qin, to E flat major, which means that you have to use the tonal and modal features of Qi Liang tuning, and you start from string 2. And it is an external tuning, so meaning Qi Liang tuning as compared to the other tuning, the Titan 2, 5, and 7, which is a perfect transition and therefore called an internal tuning, 内调. I used a 外调 instead. Why? Because this 外调, this Qi Liang tuning, has an unmatching pair at 2 and 7. And therefore, they are one semitone off. And that is what I needed in order to have the semitones that are used in this piece. So I'm gonna pause the sharing here and play a little bit on the instruments behind me right here. Whoop. So I'm just gonna play a small bit of the opening, and in fact, I'll start with the harmonics as well. I'll start with just this first little stanza here. So even in this little section alone, you can see that I used a lot of slide up to from 9 to 7.9 to 7.6. And normally in a pentatonic setup, this is very rarely, if ever, used. And even here, I relied a lot on this sliding note or this stop note. Let's see. So as I have in these songs, in the harmonic opening that I just did, I realized that while I'm able to reproduce the last line, O Canada, and use it as a lead in, it's actually 1/5, a dominance up from the actual key that I used. So I actually found that I couldn't really use the bit at the end, which was sort of sad. So it was really difficult just to get this 28 measure short verse into the guxin. So I wondered if this very simple ditty was simple enough to adopt. What about other pieces that involve even more key changes or even more semitones? I mean, while we're on the topic of national anthems, try like God Save the King or the Star Spangled Banner. It would be much more difficult to adapt with a pentatonically tuned instrument in the first place. So, as I mentioned before, in those technical sections where we have to go up the semitones, we use a lot of stop notes and sliding notes in order to achieve those sounds. But in order to rely on them, you have to rely on basically the middle ground of this instrument, and there would be no harmonic or open sound into the mix, which is very limiting. And the aesthetics of Qin music requires us that in order to make it sound like authentic Qin music, you must intersperse open sounds, harmonic sounds, as well as stop notes in a certain pattern in order to make it sound like authentic Guqin instrumental music. And you go a little further, and that's actually coming from like court music and so forth. The proper sounds, the matching sounds, the harmonic sound, and the together sound, 正音合同, 4 different types in that particular order. That's why in the opening bit that you heard about O Canada, it sounds authentically Qin music because I mixed all. But for a lot of adaptations that I see on the internet right now, you don't see that kind of adjustment or that kind of nativization being done. For example, I added a harmonic opening, which is the last line from Okanda, to the beginning. So therefore, it sounds a lot more like a natural Guqin piece rather than what you would usually have outside when performed on another instrument. But that's another thing that's difficult, or if not seen in a lot of other like TV opening and closing theme songs are being adapted to the Guqin and so forth. And what's more, those pieces oftentimes require tunings that make no sense in the traditional sanfen sun yi derivation or calculated forms of tuning. And oftentimes when you ask new composers from China who are trying to compose for the Guqin and they need a certain tuning, they will resort to just arbitrarily setting strings to a certain pitch because that's how they think of it or what they need. But they never bothered with trying to understand how the traditional way of how the strings are tuned or how they're engineered came to be. You see a lot of pieces tuned in a certain way where you need an external tuner to know whether the certain pitch is done correctly, because there's no way you can use harmonics to match them up, for example. And the gamut that they present, or the scale set, the set of strings that you have together, they don't have intercorrelation within themselves. They're all based on a external tuner. And this is something that I desperately needs to change. So as I mentioned, O Canada uses an external tuning in order to make it happen. And what I did with transposing the thing from F major to E flat major is what we call in the Qin field as 侧弄, or side transposition. So in order to get the piece to fit on the Qin to play, I need to convert it in the way that it goes into a specific Qin tuning so that most, if not all, the notes fit on the instrument, and then I get to play it. And on the standard tuning that we all know, sanfen sun yi harmonics can reach up to 6 notes. So in the bright red brackets I have presented here, while justination, that's JI, thirds offer 3 more on a fixed octave. So your hui's 3, 8, 11 all offer the the just intoned thirds, but they only come in a very high pitch and they're all the same octave. But regardless, including one that overlaps with, so for example here, string 1 hui 11 matches with 5th string hui 9, but it's slightly off because one is a sanfen sun yi E, whereas the other one is a just intone E. The just intone E is slightly lower than the sanfen one. So that's one copying, but total together, you have 9. And if you have an external tuning like the Qiliang tuning where 1 is off, you can have 1 more. So that's 10. That's as much as it can go given our pentatonic tuning system. This context, it is to grok a modern piece of music that often uses more than 10. Oftentimes you need all 12 in order to create a piece of music adapted to that instrument. So all in all, this system is insufficient to have a wide array of timbres for different notes and different pieces to be played using a and diverse range of positions and sounds as we normally do playing this instrument. So how are we going to solve this? As we know, the 5 sounds that we have, the pentatonic sounds that comprise of our gamut, our scale, is based on the cycle of fifths, or the 三分顺一 cycle. So you start with, say, string 1, and you go like a 1, and then you go to a 9th play, and then you basically jump up a 5. So that's 1, 5, 5, and then 2. You keep on going. That's the basic harmonic tuning method. So you go jumping from 1, 5, 2, 6, 3. Well, if you keep on going, remember your set B on strings 3 and 5. They don't match, right? Well, what happens if you stuff a string between your strings so that you can keep on going? Then you would start getting new sounds. And the next 2 new sounds you'll get is C, or 7, and Fa sharp. So sharp 4 right here. And then if you add the 2 strings in there, well, that means, well, you can actually do it on your 7-string instrument right now. You can try doing that. So what you're going to do, you can all try this, by the way, is instead of 4 strings in, so it's like string 1 to string 4, try moving 1 more string. So your set A, you can tune string 5 using string 1 on set A. And then your set B would be string 5, match it with with string 2. So everything gets spaced out 1 more string. And with your 7-string setup, like, you're gonna run out of strings soon, but then you'll be able to start tuning your instrument heptatonically by basically spacing out all your strings 1 more. And the trait about guqin and its tuning is that you need to prove your tuning is correct. Therefore, you have your strings 1 and 2 match with 6 and 7 right now, right? So in order to add 2 more strings and then prove your internally tuned correct, you need to add 2 more strings. Therefore, being able to go back on the cycle from sharp 4 back to 7 and then back to 3 and so forth. So you need to add 2 more strings to prove it. Therefore, you need a total of 9 strings in order to prove 7 sounds. And as I mentioned earlier on, in the pentatonic world, we have 2 strings in the middle, or 4 strings apart. And in the heptatonic system, it's 5 strings apart, or 3 strings in the middle. And similarly, set B, you add 1 more string. So instead of 1 string in the middle, it's 2 strings in the middle. And next comes the problem of what is standard tuning in this new world that we're setting up for ourselves. Well, the perfect setup for the qin to be usable for the harmonic together perfectly, we need to find the middle of the gamut and fit it to the middle of the instrument. In the past, so in the Song dynasty, Song Taizong once created the 9-string qin, but in his tuning setup, the middle string was a gong. So because back in the old days, at least as myth goes, the 5-string qin featured the gong as the center, right? And as we know from our 7-string setup, if you just play the first 5 strings, it's not enough to prove all the rest of your strings, nor will your harmonics be symmetrical on the top and bottom half. And what we have in our current setup is the top and bottom harmonic positions are symmetrical. And in order to do so, you must find the middle of your 7 notes. So going back a bit, you see how 1, 5, 2, 6, 3, 7, 4. So if you look at the middle of the cycle, so instead of 2, which is our 7th string setup, it becomes 6 because you're moving 1, and that's the median number. And that's what I have reasoned out to be. So as you can see in this diagram, I have put 6, or yu, as the middle of the whole thing. But then there's a problem with this. With the cycle in black letters here, there is no sequential cycle starting from gong or 1. So you can start that, you can see the 1 is only in like the 7th string, and it goes only 1, 2, 3. So if you want to go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, there's no complete cycle to that. And that's the downside to this. So what we have to do instead is you have to sort of bend, not the strings, but your mind a bit. So instead of 6, you have to sort of shift everything up or down dominance in order to make it think like as if it was something else. So a 6 becomes a 3. And look at the red text here. If you look down here, you can see that this 1, 2, 3 sharp 4, 5, 6, 7 is a much more sequential way of thinking about it than, say, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3 right here. So this is a thing which I call you're establishing the whole setup of the tuning as yu in the middle. But then when we're actually starting to play the piece, the jue sound is what it's gonna actually be happening. So it's actually the same kind of logic being used in our 7-string setup, because even though our current middle string, our 4th string, is considered as what, shang right now, effectively it is not like the, what is it? It is not the shang or the second tone of the scale when it was first established, because as we all know, we all start our tuning with string 1 as huangzhong first, and string 4 by that should be 5 instead. So instead of 5, it goes up into 2. So it's the same logic here. So up to this point, I know it's a lot of technical stuff, but I'm going to backtrack a little and talk, why did I choose to go for a 7-string setup? If I'm going to be adding more to the way, why don't I throw out all 12 tones? Well, first of all, it's not like we haven't done this before. There is an instrument called the luzhen, which has 12 strings. It's a tool used to calculate the exact pitch or exact string length of the 12 tones. And you see it on the right side here. And we don't use that as an instrument. That's the thing. We don't actually play it for music. And even if we do, as you know, we start by playing like matching sounds and like one open, one pressed. For the set A, we have like strings 1 and 4, 2 and 5, like that merged together. You can still into scissors fingers. So you would do a go on 1 and a tiao on 4. Can you imagine doing that for the same effect, but you go on string 1, but you have to tiao on string 8? That would be way too far. This is the reason why a lot of people, or since the past, didn't think that a qin that presents all 12 tones would be able to each of our fingers. That's why we never bothered making this an actual instrument that we play. Moreover, since the 12 strings are all tuned to its unique semitones, it doesn't have the other trait that the qin has, namely it repeats certain tones. So in order to have this as a legit qin type instrument, strings than that in order to repeat a few tones so that you can prove that your other strings are tuned correctly. And that's a thing that the luzhen does not have. And furthermore, when we choose to have 5 strings for our 7-string instrument, 5 tones for our 7-string instrument, we chose a set of tones and argued that to be a reasonable set of notes. And that is what we call a gamut or a scale. And what we are doing right now is the same, except that we are picking out 2 more tones for that. And this is a very common system because, after all, our medieval Chinese music, as well as what we now know as Western music, is a heptatonic system. What I'm trying to do right now is to adapt need for a heptatonic setup onto this instrument, and can be easily done through mathematics and logic. To say the other various kings, including like Song Taizong in the 12th century or so, I'm not adding strings because, oh, I'm such a great person and I want to show my merit or my virtue out to the world by adding more strings. No, this time the logic goes around. I need to present more tones, therefore I need more strings. So the intent or the motive of this project is reverse to that of what's done in the past. And now that we've established the new standard tuning of the 9-string setup, what happens if we want to adapt, say, like a modern pop song? We're going to need definitely more than just standard tuning. So as we have standard tuning and external tunings and internal tunings with the 5-tone setup, we would have the same thing in the heptatonic system. In the pentatonic, our old system, within the standard tuning or complete transitions, we have 5 different tunings. So you tighten 5 or you loosen 3, and then you tighten 2 and 7, and then you loosen 3 and 6 on that, and then you add 4 or loosen or tighten 4, and then eventually you would end up loosening or tightening all the strings, and that would be actually 12 different tunings. But the ones that are modally the same, so how many like half steps, how many full steps for, you'll find that in the pentatonic system you only need 5. And similarly, from what we know from modal studies, in a heptatonic system there are 7 commonly used modes. So we know that for internal tuning right off the bat, there will be 7 types of modes that can be basically, it can start off from different points, but they're going to all sound pretty much the same in nature. So we know that internal tunings, we have from gong tuning all the way to bian gong, so gong shang jue, bian zhi, zhi yu, and bian. So and then you'll find that the same thing happens in Western music, and we have your Lydian, Ionian, Phrygian, Aeolian, and so forth. To those who have studied music, Western music theory, you'll know what I'm talking about. Moving forward, as I mentioned, there are perfect transitions, such as the one you just saw, and then there are imperfect transitions, like the qiliang tuning that I have simplified. So how many rule-breaking types of tunings can there possibly be in the heptatonic world? And in the pentatonic world alone, there's different types already, but largely they can be classified into 2 different types of external tunings. The first type is like qiliang tuning, where you have incomplete transitions, therefore creating an unmatching pair, and therefore you can interpret the new scales that are being produced out of it in at least 2 or so different ways. The same thing is going to happen with a heptatonic setup. When you have certain strings match here but not there, you're going to have a flexibility over there. And the second type is like your Guangling San tuning, your Manshang tuning, where you have like the second string match the first, so you forego certain tones in the gamut altogether. And then you can use that for emphasis or intentionally leaving the gamut ambiguous for open interpretation. That's the other type of tuning that I can foresee. And once we have this heptatonic system and we have the old pentatonic system, what about like Han Yuefu style kinds of early medieval kind of music, where Chinese music is actually hexatonic? So they add an extra tone in there. That can also easily be accommodated with this new kind of tuning system. So there's more food for thought there. So as I mentioned, if the pentatonic external list seems extensive, the heptatonic one is going to be even longer. So how many tunings are there going to be? I can't tell you, but if anything, the Tong modal systems, which like for the 12 tones, you each create 7 new scales out of each tone that starts, or 5 scales for each tone that starts. So that would be 84 modes and 60 modes. Later on, they sort of boiled it down and find that uniquely there are 28 modes that they want to use. Is this something that finally we see like Tong music theory in, because in the past it wasn't? We have yet to see. And furthermore, you don't always have to tune a 9-string qin in a heptatonic way. You can still tune it using pentatonic ways, like if you wanted to play something that Song Taizong or the Li Xingyuan Ya recorded in the late Ming Dynasty with a 9-string qin, you can do that. And the thing is, when you have 9 strings and you tune it pentatonically, you start getting fun stuff with external tunings, because it's going to sound one way when played in a certain limited sequence and another. So for example, I have here 5 6 1 1 4 5 6 1 2. So if you've played 苏萧不月or strolling in the autumn, that's BU tuning. So it's dong 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 dong. That is the first 7 strings of this 9-string tuning. But if you don't play the first 2 strings, it becomes dong 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 dong, and that's man shang tuning, and that's what you use to play Guangling San. So by having more strings, you can evidently display or use that as a exhibit to music students as to how these seemingly non sequitur, these external tunings that seem to make no sense. How do you explain to students how these tunings came to be? And if you have more strings, you would be able to demonstrate how the modes work. And I think that this would be enlightening to both teachers and students into having a more systematic understanding of how guqin and modal adaptation come to our instruments. And
3 minutes left.
Oh, thank you. So I'm gonna really fly by fast here. So how are we gonna use this instrument? So in the past, in the Tang Dynasty, the people usually held up the guqin in high regard, like this is the last bastion against the new heptatonic music that's coming in from Central Asia. I think that's a rift is finally going to close with the onset of a heptatonic tuning setup. And perhaps this would be the theoretical leap we need to finally bring the qin together to a more heptatonic or a more global setup, where we'll be able to process more complex music that we're also familiar with. So with that being said, thank you for listening, and I'm now opening the floor for discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Juni. A lot of information here. Anyone would like to make some questions for Juni about this matter?
Yeah, I think I finally kind of understand now. So just one question: can you play Cuo on the 9-string qin for 1 octave? But
well,
I
everything is just 1 string bigger.
Depend on the tuning, right?
Yeah. So your xiao cuo would, instead of 4 strings, would be 5 strings. Da cuo from 6 strings, so like 1 and 6, would now be what, 1 and 8?
That could be a problem for playing.
It's a little larger, but if you things a little tighter, that's definitely doable. Yeah. So it's the first 2 strings and the last 2 strings, basically.
I think we'll probably
added anything. I just
Yes.
We'll probably be able to finally use our pinky finger to do a da cuo.
Interesting proposal.
Maybe so.
But yeah, I'm terrible with pop music and adapting it to the chin, and I don't really play that stuff. So I might be just opening the theoretical framework, but really it's up to the composers and those interested in playing pop music to really utilize this system. I look forward to people trying it out. You can do it right now on your 7-string instrument, as I said. Just tune everything one string further.
John, you have a question?
I was just saying that about the doing an octave on the 1 and 6, I can barely do it, and so making it bigger, it's going to be more difficult. And
Right.
using the baby finger is not going to work because it's shorter than using the 4th finger. I don't know, on the piano, I guess it's.
Well, right now, our chin industry puts string on the bridge around 2 centimeters per string. Well, if we sort of squirm it to like 1.5 centimeters, I'm confident that we'll be able to squirm more strings in without issue.
But then they get closer together at the other end.
That's a good point. So we're
As
going
it
to have
is.
to think of
As
something
it
like
is,
that.
there are some things that I'm trying to do on from Ming Dynasty repertoire, where, for example, you're running your fingers across the 7 strings and stopping one of the lower strings in the 13th position, and it's really hard to put your finger in there without touching the strings on either side. So making that even closer together is.
Well, as you can see from this,
that opens up
picture
some
here,
things, but it
the
closes up
back
other.
of the instrument can be further or wider apart. Something can be done, I'm sure, if we just space the instrument a little further.
Yeah, the
strings a
playing
little further
technique
apart.
has to change.
Technique will definitely change.
Right, so it will more like 古筝 to me.
But at the same time, it's not in a sense that because the guzheng is still tuned pentatonically, just because it has more strings doesn't mean that we're gravitating towards a zheng style kind of performance method. But definitely, our gun and fu will sound very different because it's a heptatonic setup.
Forgive me if I lost track of things, but what happened? What about equal and just temperament here? Did you talk about that? Maybe I missed it.
Yes. So naturally, on our harmonic tuning, we often call ourselves like we're tuning our instruments Pythagorean, but that's not actually the case. What we're using right now is 三分损一 tuning. So by definition, we only use the thirds and halves, or in turn quarters as well, of our instruments. So set B is what? Your thirds and your quarters. Set A is your half and your third. So what happens to those hui positions on like 3, 8, 11 fifths? Because they're like 5 equal divisions of the instrument, they technically are not 三分损一, but are just intoned, which is why we're saying whenever we're playing fan yin on our instrument, we're using a mix of just intoned as well as 三分损一 tones.
I've never seen a description, explanation of 三分损一which made it different from Pythagorean. People say it is, but I don't see it. I've looked at it many times, and
It's a very minute difference. Yeah,
exactly the same.
they're both thirds, but yeah.
Thirds? What do you mean thirds?
Sorry, you split the whole length of the instrument by thirds, into thirds.
But
No, by half and by oh, you're right. Okay, to get fifths, you divide it in 3 parts, right?
Right.
But so is this a just instrument, or is it, pop instruments are all equal in the West, right? Is this
Right, but when you use harmonics, it's just natural that we use your just intoned thirds. That's
Right.
what your
Sure, it
hui
has to do it.
3, 6,
You have no
8.
choice, yeah.
We have no choice. That's just the nature of our physics, and we use them. So without guilt.
And
Well,
Kevin,
it's not quite a Western instrument. It still retains the just tuning.
Right, and that's just the nature of, and we accept that. And the problem, or the new thing that I'm proposing right now, is we're just adding more strings. So by having more strings with more tones, you would be able to produce more different kinds of alterations of that new string.
Yeah.
Therefore, you will have more reach into the total 12 tones that we have.
Yeah.
So instead of 6 plus 3, we now would have like 8 plus 3.
Marilyn, please go ahead, ask your question.
Juni, thank you for that incredibly detailed and exacting explanation of how our strings are tuned. I guess I have one basic question and one comment. The comment is, thank heaven for physics and for harmonics, because that means we can tune any instrument. I mean, I tune my daughter's harp and other instruments that I really cannot play simply by the harmonic system. But I was interested that you started out with O Canada as your example, and that you kept talking about transposing or adapting pop music for the Qin. My general question is, it's true that given our general knowledge of the history of the Qin, you have 5 the strings first, and then you add the 2 octaves to get 7 strings to expand that pentatonic scale. So because of the nature of the instrument, composers of tunes, what we are now calling traditional tunes, whether or not they're recorded in handbooks, adapted their or composed their melodies on the basis of the kind of instrument they had. So now I was curious that you are saying you want to change and get a new instrument with 9 strings so that we can adapt pop tunes. And so it's the other way around now. You're saying,
I mean, it's still going to be just as brain racking just to get your tunes onto the instrument in a way that's playable with our fingers, with the reach of our fingers.
Not only
but,
that,
yeah.
Construction of the instrument. I mean, you have to add, you really, if you're going to have that many more strings as the problem between the spacing and whatever, you have to add more holes, and right? I mean,
well,
how are you adding those 2 more?
Let's put it this way. If you want to say adapt a certain pop music, we're not going to be even looking at the key of the piece. We're going to be looking at the modal nature of that piece, and then we are going to find a tuning that works with that said mode. And then you're going to basically change the key of the piece to whatever is the most convenient key for the Qin, and we're going to stick with that.
Yeah, just a quick
The
joke.
important part is the mode, it's not the key.
In my lifetime, several Chinese instruments have added extra strings, just to make a joke. Or it's true though.
Well, it depends on the nature of the physical construction of the Qin.
Yeah, that's why it's a bit of a joke, because the Qin is a little different than some of the other ones. They're just adding additional strings, while here she's suggesting a different tuning.
Yes.
This is the critical difference I'm making with the other systems. As you can see, all the other attempts to add more strings to the Guqin is premised on the fact that they want to restore antiquity and have the gong string in the middle, where it will never work as a long-lasting instrument because of the imbalance to the harmonic positions I have mentioned in the middle of the presentation.
What's that about gong in the middle? That's not, there's no Qin tuning that uses gong in the middle. I mean,
that's the thing. If you look at like the Song Tai Zong 9-string Qin, the gong string is in the middle. And if you look at like standard tuning in the first 5 strings, it's gong in the middle.
Where is that? Where do you get that information?
Yes, where
Li
you?
Xing Yuan Ya.
Yes.
What?
Can you?
The Li Xing Yuan Ya, 1593.
Li Xing Yuan Ya, I don't remember seeing it in there. Yeah.
Can we get a little background and footnotes here, Juni, please? Number 1, you found it in text. Great. It would be
for those who are not familiar, Li Xing Yuan Ya is the only traditional handbook that features any recorded music with 9-string instruments.
And I've looked at those, and I don't see that they have the middle string tuned to gong.
And is there an instrument that is extant? I mean, does the Shosoin happen to have one? I mean,
well, remember, a Qin doesn't hold its tuning very well. So if you want to like find the definition of how a Qin is tuned, you're going to find a book. It's not from an instrument. But aside from that, I think you can also this might I need someone else to help me with this. Was it the Shiling Guangji might also have something? I'm not sure. I'll need to look at it again, but I do remember seeing it somewhere that the tuning is indeed the gong is in the middle.